Right, so hi everyone. We're just going to wait 30 seconds or so for people to start rolling in and then we can kick off. So hi everyone, I'm Sophia Lopez-Chalmers and I am VP of Beauty for North America for Mintel. And I'm probably one of the few dialing in from the UK at this point. COVID's actually meant that I'm stuck here in London and I have been for the past few months. But don't worry, I am actually a bit of a night owl and I'm fully energized for today's session and I hope you all are too. My lovely panel and I have the tough spot of filling this last session of the day, and it has been a great day that Tribe Dynamics has put on. So wanted to say a big thank you to them before we kicked off. So I'm really excited to be moderating this panel today, and it's all on where to invest your marketing efforts and spend right now. And I'm actually really curious to hear from our panelists today. So I'm going to let them go ahead and introduce themselves. Should we start with you, Andra?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Andra Melnicki. I oversee influencer marketing, communications, and social media for the luxury portfolio brands at Coty.
Perfect. Blair?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Blair Badge. I'm the Director of Marketing at Summer Fridays. So I oversee everything from brand marketing, product innovation, retail marketing, and obviously all of our digital touch points as well.
And last but not least, Simon.
Hi everyone, Simon Garrity. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Kate Somerville. I oversee all the stuff Blair said and DTC as well.
Perfect. So just a bit of housekeeping. If this is the first session you've joined, thank you for choosing us. But we are going to be following a very similar order. So the first 30 minutes or so will cover the topic in hand, and then we'll leave the last 10 minutes for your burning questions. So as they come up, as you're thinking of stuff, please use the Q&A you've got below to just submit some questions that we can cover off at the end in the last 10 minutes. So let's get into it. As a lot of you know, and Mintel, we're all about understanding what the consumers want and why, and forecasting where the beauty industry is moving. And oh my God, this year it really did move. And what we've quite frankly seen is actually a real acceleration in some of the underlying trends that were already bubbling around. So let's actually start with the most obvious shift. We're all here on a digital platform, and that really means that companies have really had to accelerate their whole digital strategies and online strategies. So my first question for all of you is, how have your online channels really changed? And I'm really interested to hear if certain areas have done better than others. And shall we start with you, Simon, on this one?
Sure. So I think most people are going to say that we've seen a big shift in online sales. I think we have, as well as in particular our DTC. So we've seen traffic up triple digits, new users up triple digits, strong conversion rates. What's interesting though is I think for us, it hasn't been about a pivot during COVID. It's more about a pivot we made 9 months ago. And I think if we hadn't made that, then COVID would have been really bumpy. So we invested in the awareness and bringing in the talent with the digital skills and also the infrastructure. So we'd made those decisions 9 months ago, not knowing COVID was coming, which meant that when COVID hit, we were ready for it, and we had the talent in place to support it. So I think that was sort of one thing where in some ways we were lucky in timing and that didn't happen a year earlier. And then we were able to take those same skills to also bring the sort of those digital marketing skills to retailer.com, and sort of how do we focus on recapture rate with our retailers and sort of leveraging those same skills. So I think some of those early decisions that we had made really helped pay off and allowed us to accelerate. And then obviously, I think social has become like a really important place for listening, like it always has, but more so. I think anybody who has social teams right now, give your team a lot of love. It's been a long year, but it's also been enlightening. So I think we've been focused on like the metrics of like engagement and follower growth, but I think we almost have a metric of listening. That's where we're really focused on now too. So I think how we take that and how that informs the loop in terms of content has probably accelerated more than ever.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, obviously a similar response and just an uptick on our D2C, and then obviously with our retail partners as well, that they've seen an uptick on .com. I think for Summer Fridays in particular, we we had a competitive advantage in some ways in that, we were founded as an influencer brand, so it was essentially built on social media. So we already had that amazing presence and relationships with talent that we could quickly pivot and tap into. I know that like brands for the past several years have been talking about digital first. And I really think that COVID has forced a lot of us, even who were digital first brands, to really dig in further into that and what that can look like, especially in light of, we've kind of lost those direct to consumer, like in real life touch points, and how do we make those come to life in a digital space as well. So really challenging our team to think outside the box in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, and for me to add, I'm probably at a disadvantage. I was coming from a lot of more legacy brands, and potentially not, I have been always about digital first mindset, but, I think this helped accelerate that for us, which has been great. And I really think it's about, one of the things I found most interesting, besides the growth in e-commerce and this idea of community building, that consumers are really looking to be entertained. And I really think this future of online shopping is blending entertainment and commerce. Consumer journey is just so more connected than ever, and we've seen a really big importance of that seamless integration between paid, owned, earned, what's happening at retail, all of that really working together. And then, as Simon, you were mentioning, I mean, social has been such an incredible, platform for us to really work on community building. And with all the new social technologies that are out there, we're able to really connect that entertainment and commerce piece. Live streaming, the live Q&As, all of those things have really helped the ease of conversion. We've been able to really jump quickly, and I'm proud that we were able to pivot so fast
That's awesome. And building on that entertainment piece at Mintel, we've been talking a lot about how it offers escapism, quite frankly, to the situation that we're all in. It sounds like a lot of you were putting in the work ahead of COVID, which was excellent. How important was that sort of groundwork, especially in the influencer realm for you guys? And I'm gonna start with you, Andrew, on that one.
Yeah, of course. It's funny you asked that, because when I first started at Coty 3 years ago, kept emphasizing the importance of relationships, or what I call relationship marketing. I feel like too many companies had looked at influencers as transactional, and this mistake became really glaringly obvious during COVID. Relationships matter. It's PR 101. It just transferred into this space of online. And the brands with long-term partners were the ones that I feel really excelled during COVID. Authenticity for influencers, just like brands, is key. And influencers were only really comfortable to talk about the brands they have a natural affinity for or have been working with long-term. I feel lucky we were able to really capitalize on that after 3 years of me probably standing on my soapbox and people being sick of me saying it. But a lot of our brands were able to excel during this time because of those partnerships. On Chloe, Gucci, Marc Jacobs, Fragrance, Lancaster. We've taken a lot of time to build those partnerships in the past few years.
Blair, Simon, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, along the same lines, I mean, the fact that we, were founded by two amazing influencers, Mariana Hewitt and Lauren Ireland. So they already had that amazing network built in, and we had been cultivating influencer relationships long before the pandemic. So it was just an easy pivot into, those influencers that we've seen great traction with in the past, that we were able to, come to them and figure out, in the midst of COVID, what makes sense for them, because I know a lot of influencers were also pivoting their content strategy as well. So how can we find a hybrid between, what our brand goals are, but then also what our influencer partner goals are, just as they're looking at their business long-term in the midst of COVID and all of these changes?
I mean, very similar on our end. I think we were underdeveloped in the US. We were more developed with influencers outside the US. And so like last summer when we were kind of looking at the US business, that was a big opportunity for us. So again, similarly, if we hadn't put those 9 months in of sort of building out the team, building out those relationships, really taking advantage of the clinic we have in Melrose Place to bring the influencers and creators in to experience the brand, to have those one-to-one connections with Kate as the founder. I think all of that connectivity we did, and then a lot of what Blair and Andrew have said in terms of managing those relationships with the team continuously, and having empathy for the creators in the situation they're in as well. I think those have been keys to getting through this, because again, if the light bulb went off in April, it was way too late, and you get into a very transactional mode. So that was, I think, timing is critical for us on that to catch up to where some of the other brands were.
Yeah, and to Andrew's point, it builds on that authenticity that you've already established over time. Blair, you mentioned in the last question a little bit about in real life and how obviously those experiences have kind of dissipated for us all. So really interesting. I'm sure loads of people are interested to hear, what are you guys doing to keep your customers engaged right now?
I mean, I feel like a lot of brands were challenging ourselves to think outside the box. I'll just give you a couple examples. So we've just been thinking of ways of how can we connect, obviously digitally, in a way that's obviously having meaningful connection, but then also surprise and delight moments as well. So for example, we just launched our new soft reset solution last month, which was super exciting, our first foray into the treatment category as a brand. And, because we're not doing a launch event, how could we bring the launch party to our VIP influencers that we normally would have invited? So what we actually did was create our launch party in a package in which it was hand delivered to them on their doorstep. So we had like a really cute pizza box, and it was a slumber party theme because this is a nighttime treatment. So all focused around those elements of bringing that, what would have been a slumber party moment IRL to their doorsteps, that they were able to enjoy that safely, and sharing on social, and obviously it all centered around the product messaging. But, we're just trying to think, going forward, I think a lot of us have experienced a bit of Zoom fatigue in some ways, and we're all trying to think of how can we do events on Zoom, and it's like, what could we do even outside of Zoom that's still a really memorable, safe, but also branded moment going forward, because I don't think the end isn't necessarily in sight. So we're continuing to have to think outside the box here.
A lot of uncertainty. Andrea, what about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny that you talked about Zoom events. I actually hosted one recently.
You know how it is.
I'm not sure if and I agree. Well, nothing can really truly replace the energy and authentic connection felt during in-person events. I do think that the digital events, this virtual event, gives us a unique opportunity to connect with a much wider group. But you still need that personal level, and if it's done right, you can get there. And so we've really, our goal of our events, whether they're online or offline, is always to entertain these variety of hands-on experiences and great moments. And if you did look at what we just did to launch Marc Jacobs Perfect fragrance, we translated that goal into the digital world, where consumers and fans of the brand could connect, learn, and walk away with personalized and, most importantly, shareable content for that conversation and community building. And it brought the brand's message to life. I have to be honest, the results completely floored me, because we had 50 countries across 4 continents participate, over 1,800 guests. We really, and we even had somebody log in from Slovenia. So if anyone's watching from there, I was super impressed by that. And I think what we saw was people were really hungry, as I said, for that blending of entertainment and commerce and connection. And that was what this event really let us do, because we had a VIP session, of course, for influencers. But then we opened it up to consumers. And as I said, it really worked. And I'm amazed at how engaged consumers were, meaning waiting 4 hours to experience an individual room. We did use Zoom rooms. I have a lot of thoughts on that technology. But it did work. And I will say that. And they were such great partners to us. But also, we had 40 people queuing in line to get their, hand sketch done by an artist. So you saw that there was an appetite for it. You just need to package it correctly, and again, make it personalized.
Yeah, people are definitely, all the consumer stats we have right now, people are craving that connection. So I can see that. What about over at Kate Somerville? How have you kept people engaged in these times?
I think the main principles we're using is empathy and utility. So whether that's with creators, whether that is when we think about our content, I think anyone who's a human is affected by what's going on right now in some way. And I think just keeping that in mind as we plan. And I think the examples from Dermalogica and Blair just gave now in terms of there are ways to do events, there are ways to have impact. But then there's also times we go, you know what, let's not just do one because that's the last thing people need. And maybe what they actually need is a pick me up or a personal call or the team needs to take care of them. So I think it's trying to figure out the right balance. It's the same with your team. If you're managing a team right now, like, you know, if everything that's going on around in society has a team drained emotionally that week, and you go in and go rah rah rah, let's get creative. I mean, you gotta be very aware. And so I think from an empathy perspective, that's been really core. I think from a brand perspective, it's core because it comes from our founder. But then utility. I mean, there's obvious examples like, but I think we're blessed in skincare to still be relevant right now. So if you're
Right.
in the hotel industry or you're in the airline industry right now, it's all like marketing on dreams, right? That aren't actually
Right.
associated with what consumers are looking for today. So we're blessed to have the fact that our benefits are still relevant. But I think being salesy is probably not the right approach. It's thinking about utility. How are people looking? What are they looking for? And so whether that's content, whether that's, hey, why am I sending this mailer? What is this for? Why is somebody going to post about it now today, other than just because they get it in the mail and it's stacking up in boxes? And so just having that mentality of the team constantly questioning, am I applying empty? Am I applying utility? Does this make sense? And that also helps us like not wasting money, which is another thing I think every brand is trying to avoid right now.
For sure, absolutely. So yeah, empathy being absolutely key in terms of what you guys are doing at Kate Somerville. So hopefully, I mean, we don't know, as we've all touched upon, when this situation is going to change, but if we try and picture in our minds things getting back to some sort of normality, how do you think COVID-19 will have impacted behaviors and retail behavior specifically going forward? How can you potentially, the same way you were looking at 9 months ahead, how can you potentially get ahead of those as well? Big question, I know. I don't know if anyone's brave enough to go first.
I'll take the first stab. I mean, just in looking at how we're partnering with our retail partners that have brick and mortar locations, and you know, obviously there are different regulations depending on where you're living in the world and different safety protocols that are in place just in terms of how many people can be in a store. Are testers still in use? How is the client interfacing with, say, beauty advisors at Sephora? So just really thinking through, in lieu of that client not having that direct touch point with our product and with our brand, how can we supplement that education in other ways? Whether it be through digital education, I think, you know, a lot of brands have been looking at how on our D2C do we continue to offer, you know, customer support and customer service and deepen that education resource online. I think that in some ways, COVID is really going to force the industry to, I hate to say it again, but think outside the box, just in terms of, is this going to have long-term effects about how a customer interfaces with product and brands in store? And are there ways that we haven't even thought of, even in this moment, to market and to connect with the customer on a really deep personal level? So I think, you know, in some ways, challenging moments like this also cause the outcome can be really great innovation. So, you know, we're still all, I think, working through that, but I think from at least our perspective in the next several months, just looking at how do we continue to provide that deeper digital education through our online touch points.
I totally agree with everything Blair was saying. I think one other concept that what we're trying to do is, or trying to encourage the team is like, what's short term, what's long term? And really sort of ask those questions, and the concept of snapback, and like, what are behaviors that maybe in the next month people won't start returning to, but in a year they will. So if you go back to airline industries after September 11th, right? People didn't think they'd ever go on planes. It changed because the utility they got from it was really worth it. I think we're really thinking about that as well. If you think about initially when all the nail salons closed, right? And then as soon as we started seeing them open up in certain states, if you zoom in on the data, the searches are spiking in those cities and those states because people want to get their nails done, because doing it at home just isn't as good a replacement. But maybe movie theaters are going to be different, right? Because not everybody is going to be like, you know what, paying all that money going there, I kind of like my big screen and having access at home. So it's like, I think we got to think about behavior across that spectrum. I think testers is a great example that Blair brought up. I think short term, there's a big question. Are people going to use testers? But longer term, if we look at what's already happening in China, we're seeing that people are starting to go back and use testers because there's some benefit they get from that that's sort of worth whatever risk element is in their mind. So I think consumers are in a constant evolution of trade-off decisions, and what looks true today might be very different in 9 months. And I think asking those questions is really important. Like, don't go and take dramatic action unless you know, in terms of shutting things down. But also think very openly, like Blair's suggesting, about are there completely new ways of doing things that may be right on the money. So I think that's the challenge. It's like not just be focused on today, but pull yourself out and try to see where it's going. And that's really the challenge that a lot of the teams are facing.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, Simon. And I think what's interesting also is think that, but there are some trends that we're seeing that I do think will stay in place, right? Brand values and offering value, I think, is going to be key. People are shopping more purposefully, as you were saying, utility, but also for me, that really just starts at the heart of it is good, great product. So we have to be offering that first and foremost to draw them in. And some of the other things I think that are going to stick around is transparency. People are looking for that, inclusivity, convenience. And one thing that I've seen that's super interesting as a trend we're seeing in this consumer behavior changing, in a crisis such as the one we're kind of living in, you tend to go back to the products that make you feel safe. And this is even more true in fragrance. So we're seeing a real groundswell behind a lot of the icons we have in the market from our brands. So that's something that we're really attuned to and adopting for go forward.
Yeah, 100%. We've seen that in our data as well, that people go back to what they know and what they trust, which is obviously great for you guys with legacy brands, but also those hero products that you have, you'll see that people will be reaching for those. Simon, you mentioned marketing dollars. So I'm sure there's lots of people that want to know what to do with those marketing dollars. And a lot of marketeers right now have had budgets cut. It's a reality. So prioritization has become sort of even more important. So curious to hear from you guys, what do you do? What are the things that people should be doing, brands, companies should be doing right now with those marketing dollars to make a real difference?
I can start. It's probably going to be the same theme, though. It's the short-term, long-term theme.
Right.
So reality is what it is for right now. And so maybe you have to have much more ruthless conversion focus at certain times. But if you only have that, your brand's going to be in trouble. When we look at 2001, you look at 2008, you look at the beauty industry, what happened? The brands that stopped investing failed. The brands that stopped thinking about innovation failed. So I think if you're in the marketing department, yes, you got to partner with your finance partners, but you also have to show sort of the way beyond 1 month or 2 months. So I think it's important to be building your brand and not just getting sales this month and getting that balance right. And I think that's got to be a key conversation that everyone has. Similarly, it's important not to, it's great. So Tribe has EMV, so there's a way of measuring influencers, but it's important not to get caught up in short-term EMV. To me, it's like long-term EMV trumps short-term EMV, and a lot of that is not being transactional. It's about developing relationships and not cashing in constantly every month right now because things are harder. So I think it takes discipline and it takes creativity, but it also takes, I think if the marketers who are in the room having those conversations have got to be looking long-term as well as just today. And I think that's the discipline that's really important.
Thanks, Simon. Blair, Andrew, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I would just say, from an indie brand perspective, obviously pivoting, I think it's common sense pivoting all of our out-of-home advertising into digital, whether that be, in continuing to build influencer partnerships, but then also looking at what we're doing across paid for our own D2C on paid social, search, et cetera. But then also too, just thinking through, programming on our own D2C and, sampling programs, where we were just talking about testers in store, like where are those touch points and opportunities where we can get products in the client's hands in lieu of them, not going out and about or into a store. But then also too, for smaller brands who, may have had their marketing dollars completely slashed. I think there are ways that they can partner with affinity brands, whether it be an affinity brand in the, the beauty space, a skincare brand collaborating with a color brand, or even collaborating with other affinity brands outside of the beauty space. I think, a lot of these smaller brands are looking for ways to amplify brand awareness, and by, kind of partnering together on some of these, on potential marketing initiatives, that we can find ways to reach a larger audience without necessarily having to put a ton of dollars behind a particular program. So I'm sure there's some indie brands on there that are like, wait, but I don't have any money to spend. I would just say, look outside, look at your network of connections and what affinity brands might make the most sense, and what programs in the short term you could potentially partner on.
Blair, I love that. I think it's not only like there's the protect yourself mentality that companies have, right? But I think reaching out and connecting and supporting each other is important. So I think both, obviously retailers drive some of those partnerships, but I think that's a really good call out. Like, brands seek each other, like partner together. There are smart ways of reaching a new audience that don't cost money. So I think that's a really good point.
And we've likewise folded that into some of our brand efforts. Especially like if I talk about philosophy, we started this weekly live series of staying in with philosophy, where we're offering self-care tips, mental health tips during Mental Health Awareness Month, things like that. And we tapped into experts, but also new brands and other brands, and we've brought in experts from different areas, to really, and I think that's something that's been really good in building utility, making our dollars work well, helping other brands.
Right. I'm going to switch gears a little. So one of the enduring changes that we see at Minto is obviously the whole eco-ethical consideration took a little bit of a hiatus during the pandemic, but it's a consumer behavior that's really there to stay. And we know that consumers, and especially Gen Z, are really interested in understanding, and it plays on a lot of the points you guys have mentioned on how you guys treat the world and also your employees, and that whole ethical thing behind it. So one of the other huge topics of this year is obviously the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think it would be amiss not to sort of discuss here as a group what you guys are doing in your companies to kind of address the situation. I don't know who wants to go first. Should we start with you, Blair?
Sure. I guess, in terms of how we responded to obviously everything that happened back in June, and even continuously now, we looked at it in terms of, how Simon has talked about both short-term and long-term. And then in that, obviously, in the short term, there was definitely the need for us to respond as a brand about what our position was on Black Lives Matter. And then also too, just taking into consideration, the community that we have online as a brand is so incredibly diverse, and ensuring that they really felt as though they were both seen and heard from Summer Fridays as the brand. So we actually, the first month in June, the full weekend, we donated 100% of our profits to the Black Lives Matter movement. We also donated to the Minnesota Freedom Fund during that time. We took, an obvious break from social media just to give voice to Black content creators, to the Black Lives Matter movement in general. We just felt it wasn't our place to be cluttering up feeds with extra noise about beauty at that particular time. I think a lot of brands just, which I was so thankful to see, took a pause. But then also we promoted Black-owned beauty brands, so giving those resources to our community, also anti-racism resources. We shared those on all of our social channels. Our founders shared those as well. So just ensuring that, we weren't completely silent, but also were communicating how, as a brand, that we were continuing to support this movement. And then looking at, that was in the short term, and then looking at the long term, we're having internal discussions on, what does that look like from an internal perspective as we continue to grow and build our teams, even too in the influencer space. Like, what does that look like in terms of the influencers that we're partnering with? Approximately 15% of the US population is Black, and we're looking at that as, is that represented on our feed as well? And and what percentage are we allotting to content creators? So I think there's just some deeper conversations long-term that, you know, a lot of brands are just having. So I'm excited to see, you know, in the coming months how those will come to fruition. But I think, you know, in the short term, we'll just continue to be authentic to our brand on social.
I really agree with what you just said, Blair. I think authenticity is the key point there. And that means it's not one size fits all. So I work on, you know, 22 brands. So really, we had to be really careful to look at each brand individually and find the right way to engage, or potentially just, you know, show solidarity, as you said, by pausing in this movement and in the following conversations. But, you know, similar to you, like on philosophy, we took an approach of really focusing our Hope and Grace initiative, where each product sold, supports community-based mental health efforts. We're committing at least 50% of that to go to organizations that are dedicated to improving the accessibility of mental health resources of the Black community. On our channels, we feature Hope and Grace grant recipients, that are also supporting that community, things like Girl Trek, Black Women's Health Alliance. So we really wanted to give them a forum to also have a voice with our brand. And that's why I said they participated in our Instagram Live series. And then through our stories, we're sharing Black-owned businesses that actually were nominated through our fans. We had a call to action to them to share with us different businesses. And in fact, now we're partnering with some of those. Back to when I was talking about earlier, like a brand that we would never have really come across unless it was brought to us by our own customers, which is the Honey Pot company, and it's a Black female-owned plant-based feminine care company. So we're really grateful to have that dialogue, and again, really just be authentic with our customers in that way.
I mean, we have a lot of overlap, but I would say, like, I think Black Lives Matter is a really important moment for reflection and action in the beauty industry. And I think it can't just be a short-term thing. I think words are not necessarily enough, but words are also important, and actions are really important too. So, I mean, we were clear in our support. We did a lot of the things Blair already spoke about. We also shared all of our corporate transparency in terms of our staff would pull up or shut up. But then internally, and then we made donations to Black Lives Matter's ACLU and the Anguish and Action Fund with the Obama Foundation. Internally, a couple of big things. So our CEO, Ruben Carranza, has been leading a lot of changes from a diversity and inclusivity and really improving culture, but also development, career pathing, and hiring practices. That's something that's been happening before, but is also really accelerated now. The other thing is, I think similar to sort of Blair mentioning, thinking committing to the amount of Black creators you're going to get behind, committing to what your feed will look like is really important. So we've committed internally, but also one thing we found is a lot of people feel like they've got really good intentions, but when you look at what's reflected, it doesn't always match the intentions. So we got a lot of feedback. We listened to a lot of DMs. I personally spoke on the phone to people who left critical comments or feedback on our feed. And it was enlightening just to hear that the real people, the struggles, what's going in their mind and where they feel like we can do better. And the feedback was really powerful. And so we actually, on a monthly basis, we review all our content with just a pure lens on, are we representing our consumer? And by doing that every month, it means that other things don't get in the way, like other business priorities. And it means that next March or April, we're not looking back going, oh, we had great intentions, but we didn't deliver on it. So we've got a team of, including non-marketers, who are just coming at it, looking at it from that perspective. Like, as a consumer, how do I feel your feed looks right now? And we may be getting a C, we'll get a B, and eventually work our way to an A. But I think having process in addition to metrics is what will make a difference, both in terms of hiring, in terms of promotions, and in terms of how you show up in the marketplace. And so I think that sort of, again, Blair's saying, Simon said short-term, long-term, I'll say it again. It's I think that's the mentality. This is the 2020. It's lessons for now, but it's lessons for the future.
100%. Really well said, all of you. I really believe it's about balancing not just words, but also meaningful actions and impact. And just looking through the questions, there's one there in terms of also, you know, it is about where you are empowering and investing, but also what are you doing as organizations internally. And it's great to hear, Simon, that the CEO is looking at that as well, because that's one of the areas that people have kind of maybe left a little bit to one side. So it's much more of a less visible action, I guess. But no, great to hear, and definitely a long-term thing that we all need to be working on as an industry moving forward. Building off your, what seems to be the theme of today, the short-term, long-term, Simon. Here at Minter, we're obviously looking always at the future. So we're always looking 3 to 5 years. But I guess for you guys, it must be quite difficult to strike that balance with doing what you need, like sorting business out right now in the situation we're in, and getting people to think about what's next. How do you guys go about doing that within your teams and your organizations? Blair?
Yeah,
I'm always putting you on the spot.
I know, because I smiled first.
You're next to me. You're next to me on Zoom.
Really fine. Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, I think in looking at both the short term and the long term, I mean, we're obviously trying to stay core to who we are as a brand and authentic. I mean, making meaningful changes in the moment. I mean, I think that 2020 has caused us to pivot and shift multiple times than, I mean, many of us have had to do in our entire careers. So I think that we're just learning in the short term to continuing to be agile, but then also looking further down the line in, you know, what does Summer Fridays look in 3 years and 5 years, and even in light of, you know, the current state of the world right now, how can we plan for that? And I think 2020 has also caused us to look at the long term through a different lens as well. And just like, you know, even with the Black Lives Matter movement and conversations that we've had with some of our community members who are Black, and just thinking about even just skincare and product innovation in general, in ensuring that the products that we're creating, the formulations, are, you know, best suited for skin types with melanin. I think that these are conversations that maybe bigger brands were probably having because they have much larger teams and processes in place, but some of us smaller indie brands, you know, it's something that may have not been, you know, at the top of our radar. So just, I think that I could go through a whole laundry list of ways that 2020 has caused us to shift our thought processes in the long term. But I think it all comes back to brand authenticity and just being true to your mission and to your ethos.
I think motivating the team and helping them with this is going to be a daily challenge. And I think as the year goes on, because we're right at that cusp, right? It's September. So a lot of thinking now needs to go to 2021, right? As you think across planning on brands and retail cycles. But people are, you know, some people are having a hard time seeing past November. So it's just like, there's a lot that's going on when you think about your people, and it's having sort of that empathy, but also transparency. So just being honest, like, look, this month we may need to have a short-term focus for this reason, conversation A, and then have a very separate conversation in a different space at a different time of the week to think about what are we going to do 2021, what are we going to do longer term, like Blair's saying, when you think about innovation. And I think it's you giving the team the space to do that it's hard, but it's really important, because, you know, you're going to have the needs of today are always going to be the loudest needs.
Right.
So I think it's important that you try to protect and give that space wherever you can. And I think, you know, no one's going to be perfect, but I do think it's just like having that transparency and that dialogue with the team. And I mean, now's the time, like, tell people why it matters in the short term. We may cut your budget this month. We may give you much more in 2021 in Q1. Here's why. Like, just, I think transparency is critical, or else you've got a lot of people working remotely who won't understand why they're doing something. And that's not a good situation to be in.
And how are you guys keeping yourselves inspired? Because we're all in this kind of Zoom fatigue, draining situation, firefighting mode, right? So, you know, I'm curious to hear what you guys are doing.
I'm going to tell you that my dirty secret right now is the rabbit hole I go down, which sometimes never come out, is TikTok. But I've learned so much on TikTok in the last couple months. But I don't know, I mean, you know, and I think that's where I've gotten a lot of inspiration. It's just that there's these new platforms and new ways people are engaging with brands and talking to each other. And And I think that's where I'm getting a lot of inspiration to stay, really focused. I really try to share that with my team. You guys were saying, I think being honest with them. I think also it's kind of, crisis doesn't create trends, but it accelerates them, right? So some of these things were here and we are now just really driving them. And so for me, that's cool because that's exciting. So if I don't necessarily have all the budgets I want to do innovative today, and that's not just me and it's also my teams, I do think that we can be smart. And that, I've worked on big brands, small brands. I think actually sometimes the more indie, niche or smaller brands with smaller budgets, you are forced to be more creative. So I'm really, trying to untap that and unlock that for myself and the teams. But yes, I can go down a very, very dark hole of TikTok and not realize I've been doing that for an hour straight.
Got caught in by the algorithm. What about you, Blair? What are you doing to keep yourself inspired?
I mean, I feel you on TikTok. I've been down that rabbit hole many, many nights. It's definitely a great source for inspiration and creativity. I think also too, just looking at other industries and what, some other brands are doing that they've been maybe forced to think outside the box during this time. Before the pandemic, we would look at, streetwear brands and how they're driving, foot traffic in store and how they're creating a real surge of brand awareness around new launches. And I think just looking at other industries for inspiration as well. But also at the same time, I think in terms of inspiration, it isn't necessarily always that it should be we should be consuming things necessarily, in that, our day-to-days are spent from, sun up to sundown on technology, and glued to our meetings and then glued to our phones in the evening. And I think that also taking the time to be offline and to disconnect and to just be with yourself in your own space. I mean, I've been really trying, especially on the weekends, to be mindful of that, because when our minds are constantly going and we're always looking at our phone and scrolling, we're not really thinking of anything new and different. We're just, it's almost like a mindless blur. So trying to have those moments separated between work, tech, life, and just like being with yourself, because, that's where some of the greatest artists have their inspirations. Not that we're, visionaries in that regard, but just creating that mental space for ourselves as well. And then as well for our team, I try to I know my team's online right now, but I remind them of their PTO and taking those mental health days and ensuring that they're getting the time that they need to disconnect so they can come back refreshed.
Yeah. Disconnection is a big one. Ironic because we're all connected here right now, but completely agree with that one as well, Blair. And Simon, and just finishing off with you, where are you finding?
I'll keep it. I'll just build off of where Blair ended. Running. It suddenly all makes sense in my head when I exercise and I'm not looking at a device. I think that's one thing. And then, I think getting it's hard to get people to take time off right now too, which I think because, it's not very exciting when you're not going to go on a big trip. But it's really important to try to do that. We're going to have a day off, company forced day off in October, just paid like an extra day just because just people are burned and we just want to encourage it. And it still seems a long way to Thanksgiving. So that's something we're trying to do, just to kind of force it a little bit, because, it'll inspire them maybe to find something different to do that weekend. But I think disconnecting can help all the online stuff make more sense.
Sure, we've definitely lost that start and end, the bookmarks to the day as such, with the way that we're all working from home at the moment. We've only got a minute or so left. I'm just looking at some of the questions that have come through. This was earlier, and I think it's based on sorry to pick on you again, Blair, but I think it was based on one of the comments that you made in terms of what you did with the slumber party, etc. So someone said, do you think that there is a risk of influencers being overwhelmed with the mailers used to substitute events? So apparently online, there's a lot of them trying to get rid of products on Depop, etc. So what do you guys think about that?
I mean, absolutely. So just to give a little bit of background, I mean, prior to doing the slumber party delivery, we connected with each of these influencers individually to ensure that they wanted to be receiving this
Right.
to their home. I mean, I think even also looking at our mailers, whether it be for a new launch or just at some of our evergreen programs, just thinking through how do we ensure that the product packaging is super minimal and isn't wasteful. I know that a lot of influencers, even before COVID in 2020, were becoming much more cognizant about the amount of waste in packaging. And I think even now more so, they're even more hyper aware. So just ensuring that who's receiving our packages are who wants to, and that we're not just sending them out en masse and, being wasteful in the end, that it's getting to the people who are excited to receive it. But yeah, we definitely my team did a very thorough vetting process to ensure the people that received those mailers were ones that wanted to receive them and gave us the green light.
And to build up what Blair was just saying, I mean, the opt-in model is really, we've moved there 100% on all of our brands. That's the only way I think we can go forward, is that somebody needs to invite that, especially since we need to probably send it to their home now too, let's be honest. So that's something that you need to do. But also that waste thing has been really top of mind for us as well, is how do we minimize, packaging waste. And in some situations in color, it's been really interesting for us, because when you launch a foundation line, it's hard to pick and choose. So what we've also looked at is also this idea of, if we are to send a full range of something, to donate the products that you don't want after. How can you donate that to an organization with people who need these products or looking for products? So how can we give back to the community also in that way, so we're not wasting?
That's awesome. And in true Sophia style, I've run over. So, but thank you so much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure spending the last 47 minutes with you all. And thank you to Tribe Dynamics for hosting the session today. It's been absolutely brilliant. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.